Stefan, it's so great to have you on today. And I do not know how we missed each other in Munich. Or do
I know. I'm sorry for that. Although we spend time on the same topics, right?
yeah. So we were both at the Munich Global Conference for Nexia, was it a week and a half ago now,
Mhm.
with all the partners from around the world. And it was great fun. I think we all had a
Yeah.
good time dancing, didn't we?
Yeah,
So
actually, and I met a lot of new people as well as we joined the conference with a lot of partners, and we touched on so many topics. It was really great meeting people in person. Yeah, it is just
such
crucial
a
for our
difference.
business as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes such a difference when you actually meet people. But no, it's great to now have you on here. So lovely to see you. Now, I've talked recently to quite a few people in Australia who are partners there. And of
Mhm.
course, they've had all these changes to legislation with ESG, and they're now having to include it in the audit. And they're looking at how they demonstrate real change rather than the sort of greenwashing. There's lots that's going on now in Australia,
Mhm.
but lots of things are now happening in Europe as well, aren't they? So it'd be great if today we could go through what those changes are and sort of how
Mhm.
things are now developing in Europe as well. So what's happening in terms of regulations in Europe at the moment on ESG?
Yeah, that's a good question, I have to
Yeah,
say.
let's start with the basics.
Yeah, that's
What's going on?
yeah. I think well, what happened 2, 3 years ago? Of course, European Union was quite on the forefront in developing regulations and setting a unique set of rules called the CSRD and the ESRS as rules to implement the reporting on sustainability matters. However, I think this was such an overwhelming and huge package of information to be delivered. There was a lot of discussion going on. And what we are about in the situation at the moment is that European Union and Parliament, they are all discussing, we call it so-called omnibus standard, and changing those standards, getting some weight out of those reporting, diminishing reporting data and especially formats and timelines. So at the moment, we're somewhere in the middle. We have a lot of countries which have implemented already this regulation in their law. Germany, for example, has not and is still waiting for the final outcome. So we're somewhere in the middle. Of course, companies started, and I think one big advantage of ESRS and CSRD is that you have a unique and single set of information where you need to report on, right? Before we had a lot of different standards, GRI, for example, TCFD, SPTI, so everyone did not really know what to do. And then this kicked CSRD in, but of course with a lot and tremendous work amount in gathering information, implementing new processes. So, and this at the moment, therefore, we are somehow in the middle, waiting for these changes to finally be decided on. But still, companies go on. Yeah, for a lot of companies, they still realize that information on sustainability matters is important to the business model. But we move somehow away from pure regulatory compliance towards doing the right things, adjusting strategies, risk analysis, and so on. And from that, for example, I spoke to the Australian guys as well, and we could learn, for example, that they have a stacked approach. They start with pies, then they add up big companies, and they start with environment, key figures, and so on. And in Europe, we want everything in one go. And that's, of course, a bit too much on one hand. So, but yeah, on the other hand, it is still there. And I still expect that companies, we're discussing at the moment, limit of 1,500, 1,750 employees will be obliged to do such reporting. So yeah, we are waiting at the moment. But on the other hand, there are a lot of other topics where it's worth looking at and to continue working on.
So, in terms of businesses, how's it actually practically affecting them at the moment? I mean, it must be if you're not quite sure what you've got to do,
Yeah,
not quite sure whether you're
yeah,
the ones that are going to have to report. It must be quite unsettling. So, how are they actually dealing with it in practical
yeah.
terms?
I think one thing was, of course, which is already enacted, is to stop the clock. So we moved everything by 2 years. So from formally 2025 reporting now to 2027. Some companies just said, okay, let's wait. Others, of course, used the time and start now developing and focusing. So what companies are doing is focusing on reporting on greenhouse gas emissions. So everything around CO2 and emissions and waste. This is still continued, especially when you realize that your supply chain, and I think this is still key driver of the whole regulatory reporting at the moment is asking for such information. So enterprises concentrate on greenhouse gas protocol, greenhouse gas emissions, and reporting on that. And this is complicated enough and gives a lot of time and needs a lot of time to get through all this information. So somehow it's away from reporting on 140 pages on everything down to making sure that this is finally working out, getting all the information. So companies continue. Of course, on the other hand, there are a lot of smaller companies which expect not to be part of this reporting. A lot of stopped as well, the reporting. But somehow, on the other hand, they then get requests from the supply chain. So can you please send us this information or that information? And of course, at the moment, they cannot just revert back to their CSRD report. They need to adjust to each request in a separate way. So this is, on the other hand, of course, not satisfying with them as well.
Yeah, so you've got two aspects there. You've got the sort of compliance piece that they're having to do. You've got supply chain, which is absolutely right. We've experienced that as well. And we've been asked, and our clients are often asked in terms of their new clients to provide this sort of information. But is it really impacting a business's overall strategy and their operations? Do you feel that they're engaging it in their strategy, or is it just a compliance piece?
It depends, right? But I know of companies who are really engaging in this, and they try to do a real sustainable job at the end. So they try to make their operation sustainable, and as well it's about risks. So if you do it right, you do have a climate-related risk analysis. And then, of course, it somehow drives your strategy, because you need to know where your climate-related risks are, so that you can somehow compensate for them or have proper reactions to that. So those parts are still relevant, and I think those were originally the driver for the whole sustainability reporting and thoughts behind it, to make the business sustainable for the future as well. And those companies still engage to get those risks implemented in the strategy and find the proper measures against those risks. And on the other hand, of course, you have some people some companies who do the mere compliance task as well. But then it's most of all about all the rest and remaining of that. And one perhaps special thing which came to my attention was that, of course, ratings as well kick in. As at the moment, there is not this one reporting standard worldwide, but what happens is that sustainability ratings, of course, ask companies for rating. And we have some circumstances in which the supply chain at the end says, look, with this rating, you can't be part of my supply chain anymore. So you fear of dropping out of your supply chain, and you have 3 customers. As one is leaving due to your rating, then you're discussing going constant and not sustainability anymore. So this happens as well. And therefore, companies still engage, but it somehow shifts the focus more to action in terms of risk strategy instead of mere compliance. This is happening. But I think in this case, it's a good shift, right? Because you concentrate your strength into risks and business strategies to react to those risks.
Yeah, I can imagine also having the compliance as well must help in terms of telling you what's expected. So instead of as you say, having all these different things, it's easier for a business to understand what's expected of them. You've talked several times now about these sort of ratings and the different standards, and I know there's things like EcoVadis. What are they? Can you just explain a bit more about who these people are, what they do, and how they interact with companies? What do they expect of companies to get these ratings?
Yeah, great, of course. Well, I came across those ratings as well as of course, as we are auditors and advisors. First of all, we dealt with the compliance task. And then when we realized that those ratings are become more and more crucial for companies, we started to dig into those topics as well. At the end, rating is about concentrating a lot of sustainability information into one final grade. So if you have something like this, EcoVadis, of course, at the end, they ask for supporting documents. They evaluate those documents you share with them, and then at the end, they rate what your documents look like in terms of the competitors in the market, in a certain business area and sector. So at the end, it's about policies, strategies and guidances, you support them. They evaluate this. Sometimes it's a AI-driven process, and then there's someone else, person, then approving the rating. And with that, of course, you know somehow where you are in terms of how good you are in those supply and sustainability matters. So at the end, it's about same like environment and social and governance, supply chain. And the question is what you support to them. So the task here is sometimes to support the right documents and to, well, at the end, cover the expected topics, right? And the thing is, you don't know exactly what they're looking for. And then you get a rating. And what they do, for example, they rate and rank according to their the marks. And then they somehow you could get platinum standard if you have a certain top range of this, and then it goes down, gold, silver, and so on. And then what happens in the supply chain is, as big companies are obliged to somehow make sure that their suppliers are abiding all laws, at the end, stick to all laws, that you somehow need information on your suppliers. And then they use this and ask, okay, if you give me your EcoVadis rating, for example, then I make sure that I know enough information about you, so to fulfill their information obligations. In this case, it helps. And of course, somehow it's universal as they do it worldwide. Of course, you pay for that. And it's a yearly repeated process. But it's a very anonym and unknown process. So at the end, something happens like a black box, and you get your rating out. And with that, of course, you can go to market and say, look, this is where we are, this is how we work, and this is how our procedures got rated. But it helps you in your supply chain to keep your customers.
No,
So
I
in
can
this way,
absolutely
it becomes crucial.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, as a professional advisor to firms that are facing this, not only do you have to know all about it yourself, but what kind of things are you doing to actually help those businesses? Because they're trying to get their heads around it and how to prepare best for the future. So they're not putting all the effort into doing things for now, but doing things for the future that are going to set them up. Otherwise, it's just such a waste of energy. If, they might as well just get ready for what's coming. So, what kind of projects are you doing with them to sort of really help them with that?
Yeah, I think there are several points where we support. One thing is, of course, helping them to just get those documents compiled, prepared, at the end looked at, revised. So helping them to get all the input necessary, because for them, of course, they are normally not very overstaffed with people in this area. So it's all new to them. So to give them as well, to guide them through the process of those ratings. At the end, to help them as well, for example, fighting together for a better rating. On the other hand, there are certain aspects in this rating where you can get better points. For example, if you have an audited sustainability report, be it according to ESRS, CSRD, or VSME, the voluntary standard. So this is then something where we help and together with the client, preparing documentation, setting up the reporting and everything, so that they have one tick box more in terms of getting a better rating. So one thing is direct support to get a good rating, and the other one is to support them in their processes and to deliver other areas and to prepare other areas, which then feed into the final rating. Because normally they lack experience, and even if they have experience, they lack the people, right? Not everyone has a sustainability department at the moment. So this is more than we are more or less than the trusted person next to them, supporting a lot of topics. And once you start, then you realize in those projects that, for example, we do some things as well in terms of audit readiness. So really make sure that the report, because there are still clients which are big and which need support, even will need continue to do the CSRD reporting. And of course, in this case, it's about getting the documentation, which is done and which is nicely done, audit ready. So make sure that processes are in place, that the documentation is somehow self-speaking and linked, and you find always the way back to the data. And once you start with this, of course, you come to contact with a lot of people. You talk to internal controls department, you talk to EHS departments, you talk to supply chain, to risk departments. So you have a lot of different aspects. And of course, you have always points where you could help improve things towards sustainable reporting, but as well, sometimes even, for example, finding one solution for a software tool, for example, which supports different processes, and with that optimizing the whole reporting process. Because what happens, of course, there are a lot of things in place already, right? All the companies know how much water they consume because they have water bills. They need to write waste reports, but now they need to stick everything together. And this is sometimes about then gaining efficiencies there. This is how we support our clients as well.
So is this getting them audit ready as well? Because this is going to become part of the audit, just as it has in Australia. So is this of a quality that will get them audit ready? And, you know, what's the difference to take it up to that level? Does a company really have to prepare for to get to that point?
I think because sustainability reporting was all new to a lot of companies. To most of them, some started 5 years ago, others 2 years ago, but some at the end it is a new process. The financial reporting process is somehow trained for the last 100 years. So this is new, and of course, companies just started and kicked in and say, okay, what do we need to do? And they somehow started with it, developing tools, developing Excel files, overthrowing them, coming with new ideas because they realize, okay, that's not working this way. So it's a lot of try and error. And at the end, it's important to make this try and error documentation be smooth and run through from databases to the final report. So it's about streamlining at the end the whole flow of information, and as well to document the data collection process. Sustainability reporting normally involves a lot of people who have never been in touch before with auditors. Yeah, if you now look and you need housekeeping or some maintenance people to tell you, okay, what about water consumption? What about electricity? And then you ask them, for example, to take a photo of your meat. They never have done that before. Why should they? So just this new process you need to get in place to make sure that you are able to report on your electricity consumption. So it's about as well in those areas to make sure that at the end, an auditor would like to see processes, documentation of that, and could follow a line through to the database, to the origin of the data, and to have this at hand. It's always important not to start collating paper and everything when the auditor is asking, but to have them at hand. I just want to make sure that your internal control system is in place to be able to report. So something about the supervisory board and so on. So this is how we support to bring it to the next level, let's say. Yeah.
Yes, no, that's great. So when the auditors come in, because we all love auditors, don't we?
We do. Well,
so when they come in and you're the little business having to deal with this, what are they going to be asking and what are they going to be looking for?
Yeah. Well, in terms of sustainability, of course, they will always ask for, okay, what are your processes? How did you, for example, perform the loved double materiality analysis, right? Which leaves you a lot of open questions, perhaps once you've done that for the first time. So it's about telling how things worked, and make sure that what you write in your report at the end is what has really happened in the past. So if you write on your DMA process, how you identified material aspects in your reporting, make sure that this fits back to supporting evidence, protocols, and everything. And then, of course, second part is at the end, there's reporting on figures. So if you say, look, my electricity consumption was X, Y, Z megawatt, show us as an auditor, how did you calculate this amount? How is those information flowing from all the locations, all the countries, and so on? If you perform a climate-related risk analysis, how has that been done? Of course, we will never be better in judging the results, right? If someone says, okay, this is for us a material risk, who are we to say, no, it's not? Sometimes there might be some hints and you can see and observations you might take into consideration, but normally it's about understanding that the process has been properly set up. And of course, EU taxonomy, not to forget as well, which is quite a huge chunk of work and which flows into that. And it's a separate set of regulation within the European Union. So, and this is at the end, helping them through more or less navigating through all those standards and regulatory requirements. They're not just written down in one law, but you have a lot of Q&As and sessions here and comments there from EU Commission and everything like this. So it's as well putting things together. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's all really complex for small businesses and for SMEs, isn't it?
That's why, yeah.
It's like I feel the need for something coming on straight away as I clutch my forehead. So,
well, you know where you can reach us.
So when you deal with auditors and compliance, there is inevitably a need for a lawyer as well.
Yes.
You can't get away without getting the lawyers involved. So where does that fit in? How does the legal side fit into ESG? And what are the kind of risks that as a company we would be facing? And what should we be aware of?
Yeah. Well, especially when it comes down to supply chain, right? This is as well something, a lot of people talk about CSRD, ESS reporting, but there came so much more regulatory requirements into the whole reporting, like EUDR, European Deforestation Regulation. Of course, we're discussing at the moment as well some changes to that. But for example, if you do not report properly on CSRD, well, at the end, someone will ask, okay, where's your report? And of course, there might be something behind it. But in terms of fines, you get really fined if you have not your proper EUDR report submitted, for example. In this case as well, there come lawyers into place because it's a lot about understanding the law, finding out how they are linked into and how you at the end interpret laws and Q&As. We do that together in teaming together with other lawyers. In this case, for example, we created in Germany especially a network of sustainability auditors. And some of those are lawyers. So we work together and team up. And they are specialized in this law part. And we then, of course, it really works well, team up together on those engagements. The lawyer is doing the legal interpretation of the commentary, and we take care that the figures at the end are properly developed out of the information from the systems. And this is, at the end, it is really helpful. And we get even questions now, and there are even more regulatory requirements like PWWR or EPR. So this is more to come, unfortunately, or depending on how you see that. But at the end, there is more regulatory kicking in.
Yeah, no, I can see. And as a small business, the temptation is to, or any business really, temptation is to go and stick your head in the sand straight away.
Yes.
So I've got to deal with my clients, and I've got lots to do. And it sounds like such a big job. I think I might leave that for a while. So for any SME, why should you get on with it straight away? Is it better to, because it's such a big thing, isn't it?
I know it is. And I think this is definitely not an option, right? To stick to head in the sand and just don't do anything. At the end, it is about focusing and concentrating on the major points and to be able to, at the end, cater the needs of your supply chain, right? Because at the end, you get asked if you have somehow bigger customers, and most of SMEs do, right? At the end, it is worth having those information at hand. Of course, normally they will not ask about your governance structure, especially not in Germany, or if they're bribery or something. Yeah, this is somehow given as not being there. But in terms of making sure that you have, for example, your carbon footprint at hand. A lot of companies aim for carbon footprint. So at the end, they really know, okay, this product contains that amount of carbon. And for that, they need, of course, all the information from the supply chain. And of course, you can somehow estimate a lot of things. But the big companies in this world strive for computing those carbon footprints. And if you are supplying those big companies, at the end, they will ask you, what is your part of it? What are your products contain in terms of carbon footprint? And then it's better to have those information at hand and not just starting overnight collating all the information. This won't work because it's such a complex thing. So instead of not doing anything would be great, just, okay, do it focused, step by step by step, one step at a time, and then getting there. And at the moment, the regulatory environment gives this time, right? Because if you're not obliged to, I would highly recommend do at least everything around energy consumption and combustion and so on. Yeah, greenhouse gas protocol. And like interestingly, for example, in China, those information are relevant as well. right? They somehow overpaced as well what we're doing, because if you want to have a listing like at the Shanghai Exchange, for example, you need to report on certain KPIs. You can't get without those KPIs on the listing anymore. So, and they stick to those plans, like Australia did, what you mentioned in the beginning, right? We have the greenhouse gas programs from the US. Those are still relevant, and it makes sense, especially if you act somehow on global markets, to make sure that you have those information at hand.
No, that's
So you know your supply chain. Sorry to
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely excellent. Stefan, thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
this today. It's been really very interesting, and I think it's very helpful for anybody who's sort of looking to face this over the next year and really have to get far more involved in it than we perhaps have got away with in the past. So,
I would start right away.
yeah, it sounds like
Step by step.
Well, thank you so much. It's been great to see you, and hopefully we could do a catch up in a year or so and see how things are going. That would be good. All
Would
right.
be very interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. All right. You take care.
You too. Bye.